Hello everybody and welcome back to another review. Today I'm going to be reviewing a book that I actually listened to on audiobook and then knew I had to own. And that book is Revolution by Jennifer Donnelly. Revolution is the story of two young girls, one by the name of Alex and one by the name of Andy. Andy lives in present-day New York City and is dealing with the aftermath of her younger brother's death. And I mean like elementary school age brother. I think he's supposed to have died about a year or two previously, and Andy was there for it. I'm not going to go into too many details about the death of her brother because kind of huge spoilers. Actually, the full details of her brother's death do not get revealed until the back bit of the novel. All we know is that her brother has died and that Andy is definitely suffering from some serious depression as a result of this. She is popping antidepressants and that affects her, and she starts to pop them kind of like they're candy as the novel progresses. And her mother is so wrapped up in her own grief that she's kind of cracked. The depression and the strain and the emotion has just been too much, and her mom has basically kind of lost it a little. And also her parents split up as a result. Her father is this renowned like geneticist or biochemist, and he's pretty much left and has found himself a new girlfriend. Andy is a musician. She is studying the guitar specifically and is very obsessed with one particular composer from around the time of the French Revolution who she sees as sort of the godfather of what is now modern day rock music because of his use of minor keys as well as the diabolis in musica. The diabolis in musica is a term that was applied to what is known as a tritone. So for those of you who aren't like super familiar with music, a tritone very strictly in music theory is defined as a composition of three adjacent whole tones. So like from F to B is a tritone because it's F, G, G, A, and then A, B. I'm not going to go into super music theory because I really don't see the point. But if you want a very, very good and easy example of a tritone, you can always look at the song Maria from West Side Story, as the notes in that song actually follow a tritone. Maria, I just kissed a girl named Maria. That's kind of a tritone. It has the name of Diabolus in Musica, or the devil in music, because it was kind of considered unlucky because it's predominantly used in minor keys and like minor scales and stuff like that. So it was kind of considered unlucky back in the time when there was literally only like sacred music and secular music. But enough about music theory. Andy's father is kind of contacted to run a genetic test on a heart that has been found, in which a whole bunch of people believe is the heart of the young Dauphin, who was the son of Marie Antoinette and who was said to have died, but nobody really knows what happened to 100%. So it's kind of a big deal in France as to what happened to this little King Louis, and they think that this is his heart, so her father's brought over to like confirm or deny whether or not it is. He has Andy come with him because he's received a note from Andy's school that she hasn't done like any work towards her final and she's going to flunk. Because obviously she's dealing with lots of things, but still she's going to flunk and fail out of school. And he's like, you're coming with me, you're gonna research your final, which is the big thing on this composer, and you'll get through this. So she goes to Paris. We spend most of the novel in Paris. Andy meets up with a guy named Virgile, who I was listening to this book, so I didn't know how his name was spelled. I looked it up later and I'm like, oh, I'm really glad I listened to this because I would have pronounced his name as Virgil. And while in Paris, Andy stumbles upon a diary. This diary belongs to Alex, our other protagonist. Alex is growing up in the time of the French Revolution and the Reign of Terror, one of the darker and more bloody parts of France's history. She ties to Andy in that she is actually kind of trying to save the young child Dauphin and to rescue him in some way from the mobs of the French Revolution. And if she can't rescue him, she will at least make him happy in his last final days. She becomes known as the Green Man and sets off all these fireworks all over Paris. It's a really, really cool story, and I don't want to say too much without giving it away. But we learn her story through her diary, which Andy finds and Andy reads. Andy finds herself connecting to Alex on a very emotional level and becoming so wrapped up in this story, which is weirdly coinciding with her research and all sorts of other things. And the way that these two plot threads move, they're both incredibly interesting and you get so invested in the whole thing. And then it takes this crazy turn in the back, like, quarter of the novel. It's not even the back third, it's the back quarter of the novel. Oh my gosh, it takes a turn that just had me had me in tears. In tears. And I'm listening to this, mind you. So I had my headphones in. Nobody knows what I'm doing other than that, like, oh, she's listening to a book. And I'm just sitting there sobbing in my chair, holding my chest, rocking back and forth, like, I cannot even. I was struck almost the whole time I was reading Revolution of what are known as the Angry Young Men. The Angry Young Men were a group of playwrights that came out of Britain in the mid-20th century. The epitome of the Angry Young Men is John Osborne, who wrote a very famous play called Look Back in Anger. And it's sort of a friend, family drama, married couple drama of sorts, and it is like, wow. I mean, angry doesn't even begin to describe these characters. They're just like freaking pissed off for the whole play in a way that's like cruel and weirdly genius in the way that it's written. But there's a really famous line out of Look Back in Anger that I personally really love. And the character says, I suppose people of our generation aren't able to die for good causes any longer. And actually they were kind of talking about the French Revolution because they talk about these people who believed they were fighting and dying for this incredible cause, this idea of freedom, of liberté, égalité, fraternité, liberty, equality, and fraternity. And Revolution makes a point of having you witness the guillotine at work, and it was so visceral. I felt sick, I felt horrified, I was, again, sobbing over my chair, but it just further emphasized why this book was so good. Granted, I think I was definitely in the right mood when I picked up Revolution. I mean, I was sort of audiobook surfing on my local library's website at like midnight because I couldn't sleep and I just needed something. And like, you know, I'm 23. Constantly going through a quarter life crisis. I know, hashtag first world problems, but I mean, 23, I don't know what the hell I want to do with my life most of the time. This was the right story for me to find because it's about girls who are struggling against two of what are probably some of the greatest sins of humanity, which are hatred and inaction. Especially in how Andy responds to Alex's diary. She's so amazed at how much Alex fights for what she wants, and Andy is still drowning in these like waters of depression, and she just can't make herself get out. She is amazed with Alex's story because Alex is, I mean, risking her life just to make one little boy happy, knowing that she's going to die very likely from what she's doing, and that this poor little boy is going to die, and just sort of says, I'm doing something about it anyway. Those are just a few of the things that make this book so good. I mean, it's almost like it's a piece of music. There's just harmonic dissonance in the whole thing, and it's such an angry novel. I thought of the song Red and Black out of Les Miserables with where they're like, red, the blood of angry men, black, the dark of ages past, red, a world about to dawn, black, the night that ends at last. Where it's like, red is meant to be the colors of revolution, of blood, of anger, and black is these colors of like despair and night and ruination, and both of these, I mean, it just rings so true in this novel. It's able to somehow cross centuries and continents and yet show you everything that is beautiful and terrifying about humanity at its highest and its lowest and at its craziest. It's kind of like this is a new movement. This isn't the angry young men, it's the angry young women. So I wonder sometimes if the passion and almost ecstasies of this novel are meant to spur us into some kind of action and spur us to take hold of something and do something. And I'm just like, okay. I was so moved by this novel, I sort of sat speechless for a few minutes because this is one of the best books I have ever read in my life. It's up there with things like Cloud Atlas and 1Q84 at just sort of moving me in a way that I can't really properly explain without it going into extreme hyperboles and metaphors. And I mean, this is a book everyone should read, and I think as a brilliant piece of contemporary fiction as historical fiction with a little bit of magical realism at times, and it has something for everyone, and it's just brilliant. I don't know, I really don't know what else to say about this book because it sort of speaks for itself. But that is it for me today, guys, and so until next time, cheers.